Of course, the New York Mets had to wait until they were completely out of the race to start doing what they should have all year and beat bad teams. We'll discuss that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter, Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Well, if you look at the title of today's show, there's a double meaning buried within that. It's the New York Mets have chosen the wrong time to beat bad teams. And part of it, we'll get to in a little bit here about the lottery aspect, right? This is when the Mets were supposed to lose. This is where you are putting guys out there that aren't great. And the idea is, hey, get into those top 6 teams. And if the Mets are able to win the lottery and they get one of those 6 slots, their pick doesn't drop 10 slots. We've all discussed that during this period of time. But the bigger thing to me is that if they just would have done what they did this past week all season, well, Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander are probably still New York Mets, and this team is in the thick of a playoff race. But the reason why this season is going nowhere is because this team failed to do what they did all of last year, which is beat the bad baseball teams. Last season, the New York Mets had the second best season in franchise history when it comes to the regular season. They won 101 games. They were 40 games over 500. Now, they went 45-37 against teams that are over 500. That's 8 games over. A very solid record against the good teams. But where they really made their money was beating up the bad teams. They were 56-24 against teams with a sub-500 record. That is 32 games over 500 against those bad teams. This year, the Mets have gone 30-40 against teams over 500. No surprise, this Mets team can't beat the good teams. But until this past week, they couldn't beat the bad teams either. Okay, on this season, they're 28-27 against teams that are under 500. But they just went and they played the Pirates and the Cardinals, and they won 5 of 7. So if you take that away, going into the week, the Mets were 23-25 against sub-500 teams. That right there is the difference. If they were sitting right now and they were 15 games over against teams that are under 500 instead of right now 1 game over, playoff mix right there. And you look at the team that they had before and the team that they just won 2 series with. Before they had Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, they had David Robertson closing games. Now, Robertson has not pitched well in Miami, but with the Mets, he was excellent. They had Mark Canha and Tommy Pham, who are multiple head and shoulders better than all of the guys they've been running out there. Maybe not named DJ Stewart, but Jonathan Arauz and Rafael Ortega and Danny Mendick. The Mets were running out way better lineups than the lineups they did over the past week. But in June alone, they lost the series to these 2 teams, one to the Pirates, one to the Cardinals. In May, they lost 2 series to the Rockies, one against the Tigers, one against the Cubs before they were good, and the same thing with the Reds before they were good. Because those are 2 teams that have gotten better as the season has worn on. And they split a 4-gamer against the Nationals. And now, when it comes to Washington, on the season, they're 6-5, but they won 3 of 4 right before the deadline with Scherzer and Verlander bookending that series, winning games for the Mets. But you take that away, they started the season 3-4 against the Nationals, and they lost the series and they split a 4-game series. You reverse the results on all of these series that they lost or got swept, and the Mets are in such a better place. And you look at last year for a team against the Nationals, the Mets went 14-5 against them. They were 13-6 against the Marlins. They handled their business against the bad teams. And so now the Mets played great this week, and they should be commended for that. And I'll be discussing the whole series in the next segment. But it's frustrating because you see how easy it is to beat these teams when a couple things work out for you. What's been one key component? Well, the bats have been great over the past week. Another one, the bullpen hasn't been terrible. And the starting pitching has been maybe a little better than would have been expected with the guys you're running out there. But it's not like the starting pitching has even been excellent. And before, you would have thought it would be a lot easier to get to that combination, that winning formula with the rotation they had, knowing that you eventually got to a point where you had Verlander, Scherzer, and Senga in a 5-man rotation. That did happen for a while. And it happened in June. And in June, the Mets were terrible. Now, they lost to some good teams that month as well. But the failure to handle business against those bad teams throughout the year has dug the Mets into this hole where, yeah, for half a second, if you're a fan, you're the most optimistic of ones. You could have talked yourself into, oh, the Mets, they're in the fringe of the race over the weekend, and they just won a game 13-2. And all right, maybe there's a little bit of fun down the stretch. That's if you're really optimistic. But any fan who's got an ounce of realism to them right now and is, looking at this picture through a lens where you see what's in front of us, we know this team's not going anywhere. But it's just crazy how a couple of series going a different way, and the Mets are sitting where the Marlins are right now. And everyone would be picking the Mets to make it out of that scrum of teams. And instead, you have to think about now long-term view. And the long-term view, which is the double meaning in this title for today's show, is the Mets are now 2.5 games behind the Pirates for the 6th spot in the lottery and 3 games back on the Cardinals for the 5th spot. They have the 9th best lottery odds. So their chances of winning the lottery right now are 2.7%. Now, you get 6 cracks at it as they pull names out of the hat, and you never know. You never know where the Mets might fall. And look, they're probably going to do plenty of losing over the next 12. They're playing the Braves, the Angels, the Rangers, and the Mariners. But it's just funny that now, after you've dug the hole and you've gotten to the point where you should lose games, theoretically. Because look, I had a lot of fun watching the Mets play baseball this week. I really did. And I would like them to keep winning. I really would. We're going to get to the positives in the next segment again. But it's just that constant double-edged sort of a season where you finally have a week of somewhat feel good, and the real thing you're playing for at this point, sort of, you lost ground on that because 2 teams that are also losing games down the stretch for a lottery, you beat them. And we'll see what type of ramifications that has. But I want to get to the positives because it was fun watching the Mets go into St. Louis and take the first 3 games. So we'll discuss that in just a minute. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever been in a situation where you want to go to the game, but find tickets is so stressful that you ultimately decide to watch from home? Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer deals on last minute tickets and their best price guarantee. So you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all the fun you're going to have at the game. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seats before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps, you're all set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through email. You can snag tickets without the stress by using Game Time. And right now, people are probably trying to sell their Mets tickets. Let's be honest. So, hey, you got a homestand coming up. You can take the family out to a game and get a discount doing it. Get the best deal on those last minute tickets. Down the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's get to some positive vibes, right? The Mets played great baseball this weekend. Okay, Friday night, things got off to a quick start. Brandon Nimmo hits his 18th home run of the season. He's very close to his first 20 home run season. I believe that matches his total back in 2018, which was his career high. So he's right there to get that career high. Probably hits 20 this year. That's going to be awesome for him to be able to achieve that. Jeff McNeil tacked on another run in the 3rd inning, driving in Francisco Lindor. with a single, and it was Joey Lucchesi on the hill. He'd been hurt. He was also down in AAA. Comes up kind of out of nowhere and threw a gem. Okay, 5 2/3. He scattered 2 walks, 4 hits, struck out 5, did not allow a run. Phil Bickford did help him out with that. There was 2 runners in scoring position after Tyler O'Neill hit a double in that 6th inning. Bickford comes on. He walks the bases loaded, but gets a big strikeout to get the Mets out of the jam. And then the Mets just blew the game open in the 7th inning. Jeff McNeil hit a 3-run homer that capped a 5-run inning, and that was basically the ball game. Saturday was just Mets domination. Okay, they just beat the hell out of the Cardinals and Miles Michaelis. They tagged him for 7 runs on 7 hits, 2 walks, some home runs. Jeff McNeil and Francisco Lindor had a double steal that resulted in a run in the 1st inning. You have McNeil on first, Lindor on third. McNeil goes to steal second. It's a play that it's a little league play. And I know in travel baseball, it's always this play that we had mapped out. What do you do in the situation where the one guy, steals first and the guy from third tries to come and backdoor you home, and you're supposed to have the shortstop come over on the play and cut it off and then gun the runner out. Sometimes the pitcher jumps up and catches it, second baseman. You have all these variations. And 9 times out of 10, the play just looks sloppy on both sides. And that's sort of what happened here. The Mets get lucky, bad throw into the outfield. Lindor can walk home. Mets got on the board then. The 2 of them combined for back-to-back doubles in the 3rd inning to add another run. And then DJ Stewart hits a home run in the 4th. And suddenly I started to see people on Twitter saying, oh, should we talk about DJ Stewart being a part of the 2024 Mets? Guess what, people? I was on that 3 days before on Thursday. So go back, listen to last week's episode where I talk about how DJ Stewart could be a potential 4th outfielder for the Mets next season. I want him on the roster over Daniel Vogelback, who did have a big game because he hit a granny in the 5th inning to put the Mets up 7-1. They added 2 more in the 7th inning. Pete Alonso's 38th homer of the year. Mets finished with 13 runs on 13 hits, 4 walks. The Cardinals looked awful. The Mets were 4 for 12 with runners in scoring position. And oh yeah, by the way, Kodai Senga pitched a brilliant game, allowed just 1 run on a solo homer by Nolan Arenado, gave up 2 hits across 7 innings pitched, struck out 5, and his first strikeout was his 150th of the year. He's only the 7th rookie in Mets franchise history to accomplish that feat, and the 5th Japanese pitcher to do so in his first season stateside. He has a 3.19 ERA on the season, and we'll be doing a whole episode on Kodai Senga later this week and how he might be a key figure in recruiting, as well as what he's done on the mound and how that could really pay dividends as you look beyond this year to the next couple with Senga still under contract. Finally, Sunday, rough game. Okay. It felt like the Mets had it. They were this close early. They were this close to a 4-game series sweep because Carlos Carrasco looked good early. That's probably because the Cardinals were letting him by swinging at everything out of the zone, but he was getting by. He was still giving up his hits, still putting traffic on the bases, but just somehow getting out of it until the 5th inning when Paul Goldschmidt hit a 2-run homer off him. He also drove in a run earlier in the game, so he killed him. 3 RBIs against him. He went 3 for 5. Scored a run later. Was great defensively. The amount of plays that he made, either starting double plays or just fielding hot shots that are nearly over his head that would have broken a rally out potentially. He was just glue all game. Nolan Arenado made some great plays defensively. I just felt like Goldschmidt and Arenado beat the Mets in this final game, and that's what happens when you still have some good players. They can still win a game for you, and that's what happened to the Mets against the Cardinals on Sunday. And then the bullpen kind of collapsed a little bit too. But Pete Alonso, big series. He hit his 39th home run of the year. So he's 1 away from 40, and hopefully he does so against the Braves this week. And that's sort of the thing here, right? As I said, if you are a super optimistic Mets fan, you say, all right, they won on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They won 3 in a row. They won 6 out of 7. You're feeling good about yourself. You're puffing your chest out. You're like, you know what? Maybe. They go on, they win 6 of 7 again. All right, you're in the mix. But you really have to really look again at what the Mets just did. They won the final game of a series against the Braves last weekend when they lost the first 3. So that's no accomplishment. They take 2 or 3 from the Pirates, and then they win 3 games against a Cardinals team that just looks awful. Not to take anything away from the Mets, okay? It's good to see them play quality baseball, and I hope they continue to do that. But unless they go into Atlanta and win a series, which, I mean, what odds could you even put on that at this point? I would not bet a penny to my name on the Mets winning a series in Atlanta. Wouldn't do it. Would not do it. You'd have to give me such long odds that I consider throwing $5 on it because baseball is random. That team is so much better than the Mets, particularly this version of the Mets. If they win that series, okay, if they found a way to sweep a Angels team that's in their own free fall right now over the weekend, then they beat the Rangers and Mariners in back-to-back series, okay. Maybe they get into the playoff picture. But did I tell you that David Peterson and Tyler McGill are starting the first 2 games of this series against the Braves? That's why I think there is just no chance. And really, you should be focused a little bit more on Mets minor league baseball, which we're going to talk about in a minute with our trip around the affiliates. So we get to all of that before we do another word from our sponsors. The New York Mets play the Atlanta Braves at 7:20 Eastern time tonight. Catch every pitch of the Mets hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mets. I basically just previewed this series, Mets versus Braves. We don't have to spend too much time on it. David Peterson and Tyler McGill are starting the first 2 games against that Braves lineup, and nothing else really matters. Uh, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see if a miracle happens. They win one of those games to put Jose Quintana in the position to steal a series for the Mets. But who's counting on it? Bryce Elder and Charlie Morton are starting the final 2 games. The first game, I believe they said on the broadcast today, it's going to be started by Alan Winans, who carved the Mets up last time these 2 teams faced each other. He went 7 scoreless on August 12th with 9 strikeouts. So, yeah, I don't necessarily feel great about Mets versus Braves. That's why we're going to take the hat switch now. We take the Mets hat off, and we put on the Binghamton Rumble Ponies hat for our trip around the minor league affiliates from over the weekend. We start, of course, in Brooklyn with the Cyclones, the high A team for the Mets. Kevin Parada finally got back in the lineup. He'd been hurt for a little bit, hadn't played in August yet. Came back on Thursday and went 0 for 11 in his first 3 games with 6 strikeouts. Last Friday, I did my top 5 prospects in the Mets system. I think some people have Kevin Parada there in their respective top 5s or top 10s, I should say. But I don't. And on Friday's show this week, I'll be breaking down numbers 6 through 10. So stay tuned for that one. But the offensive performance of Parada in Brooklyn, part of why he is dropping down my list. And he did have a good game on Sunday to his credit. But and look, he was coming off being injured. So tough to hit the ground running. But going 0 for 11 with 6 strikeouts in 3 games in high A at his age, not necessarily the most impressive of stat lines. Speaking of rough goings there, Ryan Clifford has struggled with the Mets since the trade. Struck out 4 times on Thursday for a golden sombrero. Did go 2 for 4 on Friday with a double, but then went 0 for 7 in the final 2 games. So still a rough weekend for Clifford. The one guy to really look at right now in Brooklyn that is just playing some great baseball is 19-year-old Jet Williams, who I had ranked number 3 in the Mets system in my updated top 10. He's working on an 8-game hitting streak. He homered in each of his last 2 games over the weekend. Was promoted to Brooklyn to begin August, and his slash line for the month is 311 average, 462 on base, 574 slug. That's in 18 games. Again, at 19 years old in high A, where the competition's much older than him. Really, really impressive stuff. We'll see how he can close out his season, and who knows what happens to him next year. Obviously, he probably still begins next season in Brooklyn, but man, he is quickly becoming one of the most exciting prospects in this system. Moving to the top 2 in my top 10, who are playing in Binghamton. That's, of course, Luis Angel Acuna and Drew Gilbert. They had a big game on Friday night. Both of them recorded 3 hits. Acuna led up the game with the base hit. He then stole second and later scored on a hit by pitch. You had both Gilbert and Jeremiah Jackson who got hit by pitches. The guy after Acuna lineup, whose name escapes me right now, drew a walk, and eventually, again, it loads the bases, and Jackson getting hit by the pitch brings home Acuna. Acuna then doubled in the second inning and drove in a run with that double, was then later driven in by Drew Gilbert on a base hit, and then Gilbert homered in the 4th inning. So big game for those two guys. And then the other big item of note in Binghamton was Dominic Hamill threw a gem on Saturday, and he's starting to figure it out at that level. He threw 6 scoreless innings, allowed 4 hits, 1 walk, struck out 5. So really strong effort. He started the year great in Double-A, 2.30 ERA in his first 4 starts. Then over his next 2 months in May and June, he pitched to an ERA over 6 in each month. Really was having a rough go of it. He steadied himself in July, pitched to a 3.38 ERA in 4 starts, and now this month in August, he has a 2.45 ERA. So showing some good signs of life here. I imagine we could see him promoted to Syracuse before the season ends, which could coincide with the promotion of Mike Vassell. Of course, we're talking about next here in Syracuse AAA, where Vassell really had a good outing on Sunday, and he needed it. He'd been struggling a little bit. His last 3 starts have been okay, and we'll get to that. But on Sunday, 6 innings pitched, allowed 6 hits, but only walked 1, which is big for him. Ended up allowing a run on a solo homer, but struck out 4, and he lowered his ERA to 5.01. He's now made 11 starts in Binghamton. As you see, the ERA shows he has not pitched particularly well, but his last 3 times he's been solid. He's maybe showing some signs of figuring out the level. He had an 8-inning outing where he allowed just 1 hit, no runs. It was a GM, had 7 strikeouts, looked incredible. His last time out, at least he pitched into the 6th inning, went 5 2/3, allowed 3 runs before being pulled. And then he had this start, the 6 scoreless. So you're looking at a month now where he's pitched to a 3.13 ERA in AAA. And now that players aren't going to lose that rookie eligibility, I do wonder at what point do the Mets consider just throwing Vassell into some big league games and seeing what they got. I've been campaigning for Christian Scott to get the nod straight from Double because I just look at what he's doing and the way he's commanding the strike zone. I think he could probably pitch anywhere right now. But Vassell is the guy that has, gone to AAA and had 11 starts there. So we'll see what the Mets decide to do. You can make an argument that they should just play it safe developmentally and maybe promote Vassell to get him some run in the big leagues and put Hamill up to AAA because he's the guy that spent more time in AA and just let Scott continue to dominate AA pitching and then maybe go into next year in AAA or, who knows, early start in double, then get called up. But these guys are getting close, and I'd like to see what at least one of them has against the big league competition before the season is done. And I think there's really only 2 options. Either Vassell, because he's been the guy who got the first promotion, has been facing more big league type hitters in AAA and a really tough league also. Or it's Scott because it looks like he has the best stuff right now and is pitching the best. So we'll see if the Mets go that route or they just stick with a rotation of, Senga, Quintana, Carrasco, Lucchesi, McGill, Peterson. I mean, they might just keep rolling all those guys out there because, what does it matter anyway? Final couple notes. Ronnie Mauricio hit his 20th home run, so he just went 20-20 again, 20 home runs, 20 stolen bases on the year. And Brett Beatty has been great since going down to AAA. He's on a 6-game hitting streak. He's hit safely in 8 of his 9 starts there in Syracuse. He didn't record any hits in his last 6 games played with the Mets and then immediately goes down to AAA and starts raking, which is frustrating, of course, because if he just hit like that a little bit in the big leagues, he'd still get to play out the whole year. He would have got his extra year of service time back and all that stuff. And now I imagine the Mets just keep him in AAA because why not get the extra year of team control? Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. If you want to catch every pitch of the Mets hometown broadcast this week, you can do so with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Mets.